This is our first annual Flow conference, and how many people were at the Flow talks? Oh, cool. So we don't need to do introductions. You guys have been important with the wisdom. So I'm just going to say a quick thank you to each of you for coming out, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jerry Williams. The first part of this panel is really just an opportunity for you guys to sort of flesh out some of the ideas and the questions that you have, and we're going to start with a couple of questions for the panel. So thank you, Jerry Williams, our MC.
First of all, I tell you, Willis, the first question is, since this is great since most of you were at the Bird, is we'll ask each of these people to kind of expand a little bit on the theme they chose and why they chose it, and then go from there. We might solicit some questions from the audience, but first, let's get each one of them. We'll just start right here with you. Just say why you chose that theme. Is it one you always do, or was it inspired by this concept, or what was the deal?
Well, the theme for me was inspired by the concept. I hadn't really given a lot of consideration to the theme of flow. I was aware of it. But the thing that intrigued me was I've been a fan of Strauss, the classical composer, and his process for creativity, because he talked about creativity from a very spiritual space. And I think what happens with a lot of artists is they begin to think that it's all about them. And that's why, they get to a very high level and they can't handle it, because they think it's all about them. But in reality, that creativity, in my view, is something that is a privilege, is passes through us. And then if we can begin to recognize that creativity is coming from another source which is higher than us, then I think your chances for survival are greater. And so when I read about Strauss and I saw his process, I wanted to be able to share that with others.
For me, it was just sort of synchronicity, because I have been a student of talent-based management for years now. And then when in reading Csikszentmihalyi's books and looking that the whole thing is all based on talent, you know that without the talent, you really can't get into the flow. That it was like, it just makes sense. It really goes into play with exactly how we would be, getting more successful in a sales situation, is hiring people who actually have a talent for that. And therefore, they're not like going, they have obstacles, but it doesn't stop them. It challenges them in a good way. So.
Mine really was the journey that I talked about in having had the conversation with Heather, and then realizing that I had to go on this sort of a journey to capture and understand the whole idea of flow in my life. And I got really excited about the idea, which is something everybody else may have thought about, but it never really occurred to me, that that this is something that we do beyond ourselves and our time. I was thinking about one of my all-time favorite books is Black Boy by Richard Wright, written in 1945, and I can still read pieces of that book and get just overwhelmed with his thoughts about his life when he was growing up. And I'm thinking, well, he's long gone, but I'm still feeling it. Whatever he created is still vibrant and still there. And so, and I got excited about the fact that it's not a temporary thing. It can't be eternal as long as the art is there. And so that's what I chose to talk about, because it got me excited when I was just going through this process of trying to figure out where I was in terms of.
For me, I've certainly experienced the solitary kind of flow. I remember locking myself in my room to read certain books. I didn't want to be interrupted because I was so into it with the characters. And I've experienced it some as a writer, and I'm getting back into drawing after an absence of about 40 years, and I feel it when I'm doing that. But I wanted to give you guys something practical. And I can't explain what happens to me when I'm in my individual flow state, but I could better understand what happened in that communal experience at CNN. So that's why I chose that.
Hi. For me, I think there are a couple of things that happened about maybe 10 days ago. I was kind of debating, okay, how are we going to bring this such a beautiful topic and share this with you guys? And, I was actually running, and it just came to me that sharing the beauty of what nature gives us as a gift for creativity is something that I really wanted to do with you. But the other reason is too that a lot of people, like I said at the beginning of my presentation, a lot of people say to me that they feel that they are not creative. And I kind of wanted to debunk that, because we're all creative if we just find what we love to do in life and connecting with that love. And so that's one gift that I wanted to share with you, is a sense of like, if any of you don't feel creative for whatever reason, is to actually find what it is that you love to do and allow that to be a big part of your life. Because life's too short, and we discover creativity and flow once we are in that rhythm of doing what we love to do, and ultimately it radiates to the world. Because when we feed ourselves, we feed our souls, and what we appreciate and we love about what we're doing, it ultimately, our energy radiates to those around us, and ultimately we can also make a difference.
Yeah, Heather asked me to do this, and I said, sure, great, and I didn't realize, I didn't know about flow or the zone or anything, and I read very briefly about it, and I really just wanted to talk about what I was experiencing as an artist and what I had been experiencing, and I'm currently experiencing a lot of anxiety about new scripts that I'm working on, and trying to decide what's better and what's worse and where to focus it. And when I go to a lot of Q&As for my movie Wildlight, I often get the question, it's all over Alaska. We traveled 3,000 miles over Alaska. It must be so difficult to film in Alaska. What was the biggest challenge you had in making this movie? And next to raising the funds, for me it was a personal anxiety and stress that I went through, in getting the movie off the ground. But when I was really there filming it, as I described in my talk, just getting my vision up on camera and worrying about getting it correct and being perfectionist about that. And it's a really selfish, isolated place. I think creativity, that in its nature, is that way. But ironically, I think a lot of the answer for getting out of that place and taking a break comes from being of love and service and collaboration and being helpful to others. So I thought that was just an interesting thing to bring. It fit very well with the topic. I'm not big on labels, but it seemed like it all sort of fit with the topics that were coming up. Thanks.
Well, for me, the flow of the zone was special. I know many of you have seen basketball games where, guys feel like the basket is just so big in your eyes and you just hitting every shot everywhere. And I thought that was important. And like I said, many of you are familiar with that. But on the other side, I wanted to expand upon how you get there and how you feel when you're there. And that was very important to me. Many of us have the creative imaginations in our mind, and we want to do things that sometimes other people tell us that we can't do. And that was a big part for me, coming from a small town and not having the presence of professional players. It was easy for them to say, oh, you're not going to make it, you're not going to do it. And I continue to be very mentally tough and strong-minded and continue to work. And when you work, you really get to know yourself. And I think that's another important thing. Some of us really don't know ourselves. We say we do, but we really don't. But when you have those times when you're trying to use your imagination, you're trying to get in that area where you feel like no one can touch you, that was something that was real special to me. And the times that I've been there playing basketball, it all came back to not only having the talent, but putting the talent, the hard work, the dedication, and being involved. And lastly, when you're trying to get there, you have all sorts of naysayers. I mean, if you're in a game, if your other teammates don't want you to be in that zone or don't want you to get that flow, they're not going to pass you the ball. Or the coach is going to have all the trick defenses against you to stop you, but you always try to find a way to keep going. And I think that's in our everyday life.
I guess I'm ultimately interested in why things become the way they become and how we become who we are. That's why I'm interested in this idea of X, which I love that there are so many things that we don't know. And I really believe that that's what it really inspires me. I think most of us, we live on the bigger scale, very repetitive lives. We may not be aware of it, but we we do. I think we do what we know, what we learn, what we see. I think that affects sometimes the outcome of what we do. If we keep repeating the same, repeating the same thing, because the outcome will be, similar. And I've been recently, or the last few years, very interested in like, how can I break that cycle all the time, and really go to places that I feel is that I don't want to, because it really kind of inspires me creatively, and the outcome comes to it. And also, I agree very much. I mean, I've also been an extremely hard worker. Probably of all my friends, I was probably the one who works the hardest. But I also felt that imagination is such an underutilized tool. And I remember at a very young age, I had many things that I liked when I was young and taken away from me. But I remember thinking at a very young age that at least in the imagination they can't take away from me. And I loved it. That was mine. And I was inside, and I just wanted to do this special. And I think that's
My apologies for showing up late from the theater, and so I didn't hear the beginning of the question, but I guess it is the question, why are we in the flow, or what was the question?
Why you chose the thing you did at the Verve?
Oh, okay.
For your talk.
For me, I thought about it when Heather asked about the topic, and I think there are probably quite a few things I could say about how do you get into the flow and stay in the flow, and when you find yourself out of the flow, how do you get back? And I think there could be a lot of triggers. But for me, I found that many times when I'm in crisis, whether it's personal or in business, I have to have something that I go to that's going to bring the answer. And the thing I can tell you is, it's never not worked. And I start with an attitude of gratitude. And I said that in the theater. And by that I meant that sometimes, we want to feel sorry for ourselves because we're not where we want to be. And then when you think about everything that you really have at your disposal, the first thing is you have everything you've learned in your entire life that you can tap into, but you just don't think about it. You think about everyone who's told you something. You think about everything that everyone said on this panel. Everything that someone has said on this panel, we've heard it before. And you have to make yourself remember it again. And so when I get into not only crisis, but particularly when it's a moment of crisis, I have an attitude of gratitude of being so thankful for what I have right now. And the next thing for me is to remember that, Kim, your success comes from you giving and helping other people become successful. And someone told me that years ago when I was 23 years old, a gentleman at NBC in New York, Lonzo Galloway, said, "You don't see it now." He said, "But you are never going to get where you want to go unless you help other people get to where they want to go." I will tell you, I might have done it unintentionally for many years, but it wasn't until I moved here in Richmond and I was put into my first management job that I realized that that was how I was going to get there. I didn't dream about becoming a general manager of the station, but I'm in my dream job, but it was never my dream. I never even planned to want to be the general manager of a TV station. But it is the most wonderful job that I've ever had because it allows me to do philanthropic work, it allows me to do business at the station. I feel like I can actually make change, and personally, coming to Virginia, it improved my marriage so much that I really became in flow in life as well as in business, and this wasn't my dream. And so having that attitude of gratitude first, and then it allowed me, okay, now you understand your gifts and your talents, so now use them. And not focus on the things that you're not good at, but you can read a lot of books that talk about when you know about your strength and talent. That's the thing we need to read a lot about. That's the thing we need to do very well. And the things that you're not good at, you know what I do? I hire department heads that are good at them. People will tell you in the meeting, I will ask 1,000 questions, and I used to be afraid to act like I'm the stupidest guy in the room because I'm a manager. But I found that you may be in the room thinking of that question, and there are 5 other people who don't have the answer either, because if you're not embarrassed about wanting to gain knowledge and wanting to get something done, that's when you're flowing. And now when I go to work every day, it's just like, I'm ready for a day of exploration. When it snows, my wife can tell you, I love it because that's when the TV station comes alive, especially in Richmond. 4 inches of snow in Richmond is a crisis, but it's what we do all the time. And communicating and being first informers, you know, is what I love to do. And I'm passionate about that, but I'm also passionate about life. But it's the attitude of gratitude. And I say it to myself, literally in my car every day. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different trigger. For me, I try to remember when you were in crisis and you got out of crisis, what did you do? And I thank the universe every morning for what I have, and then I go on.
Great. I want to. We started late. Imagine that. And we've got 15 minutes before we break out to the next session. So what I'm going to do is going to get a little more creative here and give you a question, and then I want everybody, and we're not going to go down the line. We'll let you just volunteer to answer it. The 2-sentence answer to this question is, when your flow gets blocked back into the flow, and anybody that wants to say what their secret is, in 2 sentences or less.
Oh, 2 sentences.
We only got 15 minutes, so we need to try to keep, short, sweet answer so we can have more. Go ahead, Jim.
I go for a walk.
I was going to say, I love to go running or swimming, anything physical.
That's what I do.
I would say when I was writing my most recent book, and if you have a full-time job, and at the time I was writing, both kids were at home, and you're doing all the parenting stuff, and you have to find a way, a trigger or something to get you back in the mood, to find the tone that you're writing with and the voice that you're writing with, and I use music. There was music for me that created the feeling that in me that this music belonged with this story. And if I was making a movie, this would be my soundtrack. And so I would sit and I would listen to that, and I would read the last part of the chapter or the last few pages of the previous work while I was listening to this music. And it took me like that. It got me in the mood just like that. So it got me in my, what we refer to today as my flow very quickly.
Great.
I don't believe in writer's block, first of all. I don't believe in the creative block, first of all. It means that when you have a writer's block, it means you don't know your characters. If you know your characters, you know where they come from, where they're going, and you know their thought process. So research is about that. And as a director, if I meet a creative block, it's because I don't know my story. But if I know my story, if I know my characters, I know the point of the story, then there's no such thing. Don't be fooled by it. If writer's block and creative blocks are just because you haven't done enough research.
Anybody else?
I call a meeting. I mean, I bring in, and when I'm blocked, I bring in the A-team, I get everybody together and say, okay, and we put it down on paper, and we start, free thinking. And it's like a no bad idea situation. We just write everything down. We call it a brain dump. We just dump our brains completely out. And that's what I mean. I mean, I have to have people. When I was a new manager, people used to say to me, the key to management is to hire people who do things better than you do. I never quite understood that, really, because my managers always seemed like they were so perfect. But the fact is, you do need to have people around you who have talent you don't have. I mean, that really is the key. Because otherwise,
I want to cut you off because we have to move here. Levis, you haven't said anything. That's your job, is to come up with creative ideas all the time. What do you do when you get blocked?
Well, okay. I thought you were looking at me.
I was actually asking Levis because he's in the advertising business, but you can answer it after.
When you get stuck, to me, it just means that your brain is full. So that means you gotta think about stuff. So it's just like change a lot of thinking. It just means to me that.
So how do you do that? I mean, it's easy to say change the thinking, but what do you do to stimulate that?
It's probably because you fell in love with something, and just fell in love with it. Just go to places together that you're like, oh my God, I want to go there. Make your brain, make your mind exciting again, because it's like you're just kind of falling into like doing things that is pretty comfortable. And I think that's really telling you, because this is not good enough. So to me, it's like maybe when I kind of get in that place, it's like maybe at 1.5 second. moment, then I was like, okay, throw it out, start over, do something else, change the rules. You gotta change the rules all the time, exactly. Like in your head. This is all like inside job. There's nothing I have nothing like walls or showers or dogs or anything like that. It's an inside job. It's how you think about the stuff you're thinking about. Yes.
Kevin, did you have an answer?
What I have to do, and I do it on a regular basis, when I get stuck, I have to go to a quiet place, and usually I do it in the morning, and I meditate on it. And I literally think about it all night, because when you're having problems, it's hard to sleep, but I get up in the morning, and I meditate on it. And sometimes meditation's in my car for 5 minutes. And it's funny how when you just quiet yourself, after your mind has thought about it, ideas begin to pop. And then like Linda, what I do if it's a business problem, I bring in the people I respect the most, usually my department heads, and I lay the problem out, and I do something that is sometimes hard for me to do, is I stop talking and I just listen. And that's the most important thing you can do, is when people know that you will come into a room and they can say whatever they want, and there's no bad idea, even though you're the boss. A lot of times in leadership, you have to give people the freedom to actually know and trust that they can tell you what it is that they think, and that's where the answers usually bubble up.
You
Or I ask my
can
wife.
tell Jean's been on air, because she's the one that gave the short answer. Johnny's up. Johnny or Frank, do you have anything to add?
Well, I guess just for me, in basketball, when you get stopped or you get out of the flow, I go to what we call a bank shot. It's an easy shot. You go back to something that you can do with your eyes closed and move back out. So, instead of shooting from long range, and most of the time the people who are really in the flow, you feel good from shooting from 3-point range, I go back to the bank shot.
I'm a makeup artist, special effects makeup artist, and I work on masks. And right now I'm working on huge masks. It's very big, laying on hair. And I always get to a place at the end of my creative project where I'm bored and I'm tired and I can't finish it, and I feel terrible about myself because I can't get to the end of that project because I'm just like, oh, I'm done with this. And so I'm working through that right now. And I think a lot of it is discipline. It's about just learning how to power through it, because this is what separates the great artists from the ones that never accomplish what they want to. You have to power through it, I guess.
Question?
Not really a question. I just thought that's a little something that kind of came up in my mind about that, but I still struggle, I think, with
So I was
trying to
going to try
finish
to
a
repeat it, so the
project.
people in the back can't hear you, so that's why I was.
I think the problem with a lot of artists that haven't been successful is because they're not fourth quarter players. I'm not saying you're that way, but there are just a lot of people when there are 2 minutes left in the game and they're down by 5 points, they quit, they give up. You really have to train yourself to be resilient, and you have to train yourself to be a finisher. And Johnny knows he couldn't make it in the NBA if he wasn't a finisher. And that same principle applies to all artists. You have to be a finisher. You have to train yourself to be that. Because I would venture to say that 95% of the artists that I know that don't make it is because they're not fourth quarter players. So don't not be a fourth quarter player. Forget about the result, just do it. That's why that Nike commercial is so amazing. Psychologically, they're messing with us because just do it. Most people don't do that. So just train yourself to be a fourth quarter player. Just say, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to make it better and better and better and better until you're completely exhausted by the creative process. And then at the end, you know that you've done it.
Any other comments?
I think what Jesse said is right on. I just want to add that in some creative endeavors, and it might be your case too, it might be just the opposite might also work, which is kind of step back, allow yourself to take a couple of breathers and just say, okay, I'm going to think about something else, do something else, inspire myself, go listen to music, go dance, or maybe do another activity. Sometimes when you allow yourself to just take a break from what you're doing and you go back to it, you're actually able to see it with completely fresh eyes. So, I think both extremes can actually be really helpful depending on what the activity is about.
We've got a question over here.
It's a comment. The contrast to the writer's block composing in terms of the gift and an amateur statement. This is the first time I've heard a panel state the contrast of the writer's block. But at the same time, I think we have to understand that if we start to write at a moment that our gift is not flowing, then it becomes a writer's block. But there are times that when you take a break, and then perhaps you get into your moment, or your flow.
Can I ask you a question though? And this is why I don't believe in writer's block. If you know a person on a very intricate level, you know yourself on a very intricate level, you know how you're going to respond in every moment because you know your history. So if you're writing about a character and you say, well, I don't know what to do with that character next, if you know the backstory of that character, you know all the problems that character is encountering, you can answer every question in regards to that character, so then you won't reach that block. And it happens for directors in movies. I see them, they get stuck. I said, but do you really know your story? There's that old adage, what's my motivation? People laugh at that, but that's a very deep question. What is your motivation? Because when you find out what your motivation is, you can answer every question. So it's about research.
I understand it, but at the same time, you're writing, let's say, in a professional sense, and writing not in your gift makes a difference. Wherein if you're writing your gift, it just flows. But if you're trying to make it happen, there's times that it will not flow. So that becomes the concept of the writer's block for me. Do I understand what you're saying also?
Jean, you're dying to say something.
I just want to say that there's something that's just burning. I need to get it out. So many of us have that inner judge that might say, you're not good enough, this is not working. It's like, it's natural that sometimes not everything in life is always beautiful, is always aggressive, is always, in the flow all the time. So sometimes it's about just allowing ourselves to be realizing that inner judge might be taking over us. The question is, for each person it's very different, but how do we find that other voice that might counteract the judge, or whatever else, it's the critic inside of us, and say, okay, I hear you, you exist, I give you, acknowledge your presence, but right now you're not being fun. I need to find some other energy, some other ghost in our minds or in our hearts that's going to allow us to propel. Because we can't just pretend that the inner critic, the inner judge doesn't exist. I don't know any creative person who hasn't had the experience of feeling like, gosh, I don't know where to go from here. It's part of the creativity. I mean, even some of the most, precious artists, we read about them having those kind of difficulties. It's about how we counteract that. And that answer is to each individual person.
And isn't writer's block just a label, is the thing that we call it? Everybody is been in flow, and then suddenly you find yourself out of it, and sometimes you don't know, well, what happened? Or you know that you know something so well, and yet you can't figure out the answer, whether that's writing, or creativity, or making a movie, or doing the news. I've seen it happen when a director has lost his head. So sometimes you have to have a pause or a break to make you remember to make a mistake. I don't know how you can not make a mistake. You cannot be perfect unless you have really made a major mistake. You do not know what it's like to fail unless you have failed. So that the next time that you are working with someone and you see them failing, you can go to them and say, I know where you are, and let me help you get through it. But if you have never failed, you cannot help me because you don't understand what it is. You can't tell me how to get out of it. So if it's writer's block or a creative block or whatever it is, that's just a label. But when you don't have the idea anymore, you have to stop and pause and then find your place. And as you've heard from all of us, finding your flow is different. And as you begin to know yourself better, you know where to go back to. Sometimes it's creative writing. I go to Deepak Chopra and read some of the things he talks about, 7 essential laws of nature. That gets me going. That's for business. I have my business principles. So that I already know, but now, how do you inspire other people?
Jean, did you?
No, that's
Okay. You got blocked. Go back here.
All right. So going to the finishing out the fourth quarter, and you said you did some reading to help motivate you. Can you tell me when you are sort of stuck and you know, maybe taking a break, is there some sort of tricks that maybe each one of you might have, whether it's like a group of friends that suddenly once you've got together with them, the creative juices start flowing, or a book? Is there some other things that maybe you go to that will help that proceed once you sort of are in that fourth quarter? You've been working 12 hours a day for 5 months and you need that extra motivation. Any kind of hints that each of you use?
Deadlines and paychecks. It also help you.
I also bring it back to the basics. I mean, I'm pretty practical in that respect. You know, it's like when you know, like if you look at a figure skater and they have to be able to skate that perfect figure eight, and they practice that figure eight like ridiculously amount, right? You know, you hear about Tiger Woods and how many shots he takes a day, and how many shots did you take, Johnny? I mean, it's really easy to look at it from the standpoint of an athlete because it's so, you know, out there and you can really see. But, you know, in my thinking, I always go back to basics. Okay, where does it start? You know, what's the motivation? What am I trying to do? You know, and start over. In essence, start with a blank canvas, even though you already have 3/4 of what you're doing on paper. Clear the deck and start over, and go back to the basic again.
I take a pause. You know, and someone taught me a long time ago. They said, I went to someone for advice. I said, these problems, and he's a very wise person. And he said to me, well, if it's not working, change it. I was like, what? I come to you with this advice and that's all you have to say? But then I realized it's a very, very profound statement. Sometimes we create things that don't work. So then you have to take a pause and say, as a director, we have to do this. That's going on the cutting room floor. I just did a movie on Muhammad Ali, and we had a scene that probably cost $25,000. I threw it on the cutting room floor. The producer's like, what are you doing? I said, it doesn't work. We thought it might work, but you have to be willing to take that pause, admit to yourself that that idea at that moment is not working. Put the ego aside. Take that pause and admit to yourself that's not working. So if it's not working, and you've tried and tried and tried and tried and tried in your life to make something work, and you force it, and it still doesn't work, you may have to say to yourself, take that pause. I'm going to change it and try something else.
And I also think it's how when you approach your project. You know, after many years of Jesse and I both were at points in our career directing live television shows, live broadcasts, and in a newscast is made with blocks separated by commercials, and it's a very intense process. There are a whole lot of switches and calls and things that are going on that have to happen so that you're not at home going, oh, look what they just did. But when the way I have learned to get through it was to never approach doing the show, but approach to doing the first block, and then get in the commercial, take a breath, and do the second block. And the same thing happens when I think about when I'm starting a chapter in a book, or when I sit there for the first time. You can't think of the whole book. You think of your character's doing one little thing right. Just write that one little thing. It's when a lot of times I feel that people can get bogged down because they sit there and they think, this is my story. Well, we're not dealing with the story right now. We're dealing with one instance in your character's life. And I think it makes it a lot easier to do it that way.
Backing up, I don't take your question there. Backing up on what you said, the idea of taking a break, and what you said, I love the idea of bring somebody else in, get a new point of view, bring a friend in and say, what do you think? And that's the thing I think if somebody looks at, this thing's not working, you say, well, you know, I didn't think it was, but you're right, it's not working. We done?
You do one more.
And one more. You're dying to ask your question. Let's go for it.
The creative process, of course, it depends on so many other people, and you spoke to that, so did Johnny. How do you get your flow to flow on to others and pull them into your creativity so it sparks and it gets them moving with you?
Did everybody hear that back there? Nice.
I can tell you one simple thing happened to me that I didn't even know that I was creating this. I was directing the pool for, which means that NBC was the pool for this particular event, but all the networks were taking our feed because you can't get all these cameras in place. This was the funeral of President Ford. And as we were about to go live for the first time, the associate director was counting down, and I said to everybody, let's have a great show, and what I feel here is simple and elegant. And I can't tell you, the cameraman came up to me afterwards and said, at that moment, I was in it. I knew what you wanted. I knew how to do my job. I didn't have any more questions about what kind of shots I should go and how I should go for it. I wasn't even thinking about it. It's just my view, what I thought was appropriate for a presidential funeral. Not to go crazy, but to do something simple, but to do something elegant. And it set the tone for everybody, and I think we fed off of that for that whole time.
Anybody else?
I have a simple formula to get others to inspire the people. It's real simple. Passion. People see your passion, they see your love for what you do. They're gonna want to be a part of that. Someone said to me once, everybody likes a winner. They told me that 25 years ago. And part of that being a winner is having a winner's attitude. And the proper attitude to me is passion. And when people see how passionate you are, how much you love this product, how excited you are about that, they want to be a part of that. But if your head's down and you're thinking, oh, this is terrible, this sucks, nobody's going to do anything for you. But if you have that passion, you will. And that's part of Kim's leadership and all the people up here. They know that when they exude that kind of enthusiasm, it's infectious. And that's how you get other people to want to be well for them.
You segued beautifully to our finish, talk about a group of winners, passionate people here. Let's give them all a hand.